1915, the Admiralty, London. A meeting that should not have produced anything remarkable is about to produce the most cost-effective warship the Royal Navy has ever commissioned. The man presenting the proposal is Eustace Tennyson D'Incourt, the director of naval construction, and what he is describing is a vessel that the Navy's traditionalists will immediately dismiss as underpowered, underarmored, and frankly unserious as a fighting ship. It will cost £1.2 million to build. A battleship of the same era costs between £2.5 and £3 million. It will carry guns larger than some cruisers. It will draw so little water that it can operate in rivers, estuaries, and coastal shallows that would ground any capital ship attempting the same mission. It will be slow, ugly, and completely unable to survive a fleet engagement against anything larger than a destroyer. The critics will call it a cheap solution to a problem that deserved a proper warship. They will be half right about the cheap part. They will be entirely wrong about everything else. This is the story of the British Monitor, the most cost-effective delivery system for heavy naval gunfire ever built, and why the Royal Navy kept building them across 2 world wars while every other navy dismissed the concept as obsolete. The strategic problem that produced the Monitor began in the autumn of 1914, when the Western Front solidified into a line of trenches running from the Swiss border to the Belgian coast at Nieuport. The section of that line running through Belgium and into the Channel ports sat within range of the sea. The German army holding that section needed its supply lines, its railway junctions, and its artillery positions protected. The Royal Navy recognized immediately that ships carrying heavy guns could reach targets on that coastal flank that land-based artillery could not approach. The problem was range and draft. The Belgian coast was shallow. The inshore waters where the targets sat were full of sandbanks, shoals, and channels that the Navy's cruisers and even its destroyers could not navigate safely while maintaining their speed and maneuverability. What the situation required was a platform that could carry the heaviest possible gun into very shallow water, hold a stable firing position long enough to deliver accurate fire at ranges up to 20 miles, and survive the attention of German shore batteries long enough to complete its mission. No existing warship in the Royal Navy met all 4 requirements simultaneously. The Monitor was designed specifically to meet them. To understand why the Monitor's cost advantage over the battleship was real rather than simply a consequence of cutting corners on capability, you have to understand what a Monitor actually sacrificed to achieve its price point, and what it did not sacrifice. A battleship costing £3 million in 1915 carried its heavy guns and armored turrets protected by armor plate up to 13 inches thick, mounted on a hull capable of 21 knots, surrounded by torpedo protection systems, underwater compartmentalization, and secondary armament designed to engage both surface and air targets. The armor and the machinery that produced the speed accounted for the majority of the battleship's cost and the majority of its weight. A Monitor costing £1.2 million carried the same caliber guns, frequently in turrets removed from battleships under construction or refit, mounted on a flat-bottomed hull that drew 8 to 10 feet of water and made 6 to 8 knots. It had minimal armor on its hull sides, because it was never intended to fight at ranges where enemy naval guns could engage it effectively. Its crew numbered approximately 200 against a battleship's complement of over 1,000. Its engines were small, its fuel consumption was low, and its maintenance requirements between bombardment missions were a fraction of those a battleship imposed on a dockyard. The Monitor had been designed around the delivery of one specific capability: heavy gunfire at land targets from shallow inshore positions, and everything that did not contribute to that capability had been removed from the design to keep the cost down. The result was a ship that delivered the primary capability of a battleship at 40% of the price. The gun fits that went into the Monitors during both World Wars illustrate the cost efficiency more precisely than any other comparison. HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, the most powerful British Monitors of the First World War period that continued into the Second, each carried 2 15-inch guns in a twin turret. Those were the same 15-inch Mark I guns that armed HMS Warship and the Queen Elizabeth-class battleships. The turret on Erebus had been built for the battleship HMS Ramillies and was transferred to the Monitor during construction, allowing the Navy to deploy a 15-inch gun platform for a fraction of the cost of the battleship that would have carried the same weapons. The shell that left Erebus's 15-inch guns was identical to the shell that left Warship's 15-inch guns. The damage it delivered to the target at the end of its flight was identical. The platform that launched it had cost £1.2 million instead of £2.8 million. The shells per pound of ship cost delivered to a land target from HMS Erebus were approximately 2.3 times higher than the shells per pound of ship cost delivered by a Queen Elizabeth-class battleship performing the same bombardment mission. That ratio held across every monitor in the class and across every bombardment mission the monitors performed in both wars. If you are enjoying this look at how the Royal Navy built the most cost-effective heavy fire support platform in naval history by ignoring every convention about what a warship was supposed to be able to do, a quick subscribe helps the channel keep producing deep dives like this one. The Monitor's operational record in the First World War established the concept's value before any critic had time to organize a coherent argument against it. Between 1915 and 1918, monitors of the Dover Patrol, operating from the Belgian coast and from the Thames estuary, fired over 200,000 heavy-caliber rounds at German targets on the Western Front. Railway junctions at Ostend and Zeebrugge were struck repeatedly at ranges exceeding 20 miles. German artillery batteries positioned to shell the British lines were neutralized from positions no land-based gun could have reached. The submarine pens at Zeebrugge, the most important German naval facility on the Belgian coast, were bombarded sufficiently to force the Germans to reinforce their concrete protection to depths that eventually exceeded any shell's penetrating capability, a fact that itself demonstrated the effectiveness of the Monitor campaign by showing how seriously the Germans took the threat. HMS General Wolfe, a Monitor mounting an 18-inch gun, the largest naval gun ever fitted to a British warship, fired experimental long-range shots at targets over 30 miles distant, establishing range records that no other naval weapon of the era approached. None of this firepower had been delivered by ships designed for fleet operations. It had been delivered by platforms that the Navy's traditionalists had called unserious. The Second World War's Monitor operations added a dimension to the cost-effectiveness argument that the First World War record alone could not have provided. HMS Erebus and HMS Terror entered the Second World War as ships that had been in service for over 20 years. Their hulls were old. Their machinery was worn. Their fire control systems were of a standard that pre-war critics had correctly identified as inferior to the equipment being fitted to new cruisers and destroyers. On the 14th of February, 1941, HMS Terror was sunk by German aircraft off Derna on the Libyan coast, her age and limited anti-aircraft capability making her vulnerable to the air attacks that a more modern and faster ship might have evaded. The loss confirmed everything the critics had said about the Monitor's limitations as a warship. It did not change the accounting. Terror had been in service for 24 years. She had fired tens of thousands of heavy-caliber rounds at land targets across 2 world wars. She had cost £1.2 million to build and had delivered firepower that would have required the sustained commitment of multiple cruisers at significantly higher operating cost per round delivered to replicate from conventional warships. HMS Erebus survived to bombard the Normandy beaches on the 6th of June, 1944, firing her 15-inch guns at German shore positions at ranges that no field artillery could match, alongside HMS Warship and the battleships of the Naval Bombardment Force, delivering the same weight of shell from the same caliber of gun at a fraction of the program cost that the battleships represented. The Normandy bombardment figures complete the cost-effectiveness case in terms that require no interpretation. On D-Day, the Naval Bombardment Force included 6 battleships and monitors carrying 15-inch or 16-inch guns, supplemented by cruisers and destroyers. The cost of operating and maintaining the 6 capital ships in that force for a single year of wartime service exceeded £40 million when fuel, crew pay, dockyard maintenance, and ammunition supply were included. The 2 monitors present, Erebus and the 14-inch monitor HMS Roberts, had cost a combined £2.6 million to build and consumed a fraction of the annual operating budget of a single battleship. They fired the same caliber shells at the same targets on the same morning as ships that had cost 10 times as much to construct and 10 times as much to operate. The argument that the Monitor was a cheap substitute for a proper warship dissolved against those numbers. The Monitor was not a substitute for a battleship. It was a different tool designed for a different purpose. It delivered that purpose more efficiently than any alternative the Royal Navy could have designed. The Monitor program across both world wars produced 28 vessels of varying gun calibers and displacement, ranging from small coastal monitors mounting single 6-inch guns to the 15 and 18-inch armed vessels that represented the heaviest mobile gun platforms Britain ever deployed. The total construction cost of the entire Monitor program across both wars was approximately £35 million. A single King George V class battleship commissioned in 1941 cost £11.5 million. The entire Monitor fleet across 30 years of construction cost approximately 3 battleships. It delivered heavy gun support to every major coastal campaign the Royal Navy fought across both wars, from the Dardanelles in 1915 to the Scheldt Estuary in 1944. No other weapons program in Royal Navy history produced a comparable ratio of fire support capability delivered to construction cost expended. What the Monitor program proved was not that the traditionalists had been wrong about what the Monitors could not do. They had been entirely correct. A Monitor could not fight a fleet engagement. It could not pursue a surface raider. It could not protect a convoy or escort a carrier. It could not even defend itself against sustained air attack without significant fighter cover overhead. Every limitation the critics identified was real, accurately described, and correctly attributed to the design decisions that had kept the cost down. What the critics had not correctly analyzed was whether those limitations mattered for the missions the Monitors were actually assigned. A ship that cannot fight at sea, but can put a 15-inch shell onto a German railway junction 20 miles inland from a position 8 feet of water deep, repeatedly, reliably, and at 2.3 times the shell per pound efficiency of the battleship carrying the same gun, is not a cheap substitute for a proper warship. It is a proper warship for the specific job it was built to do. The Royal Navy understood that distinction in 1915 when it ordered the first Monitors built. It kept understanding it across 2 world wars and 30 years of operations that proved the accountants had been right and the traditionalists had been wrong about the one question that mattered. Not what the Monitor was, but what it cost to do what it did.